Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. It is my pleasure to introduce one of our summer interns, Olyvia Weber. She's a local girl, has been with us for the past 3 months. This is wrapping up her time as her internship. But one of the tasks we asked her to do was to do some research and a presentation that can be shared. So we are recording this for our YouTube channel as well, so our membership that can't come in this morning are able to view it as well. And she has selected the topic of some fires that happened in the Calumet. So with that, I will let Olyvia go ahead and start.
Yes, thank you. Like she said, today I'm going to be talking about both the 1886 and 1944 fires, and I'll include just a little bit of background and history of the Calumet in there as well. While the fires actually took place in two different buildings across two different locations, both are tied to the Calumet name and share many similarities. I first ended up hearing of the fires and the supposedly haunted nature of the hotel when I was in elementary school, and was eager to learn more about the history of one of Pipestone's most prominent buildings. While the 1886 and 1944 fires are not the only ones in the Calumet's history, they are the largest, most prominent, and most destructive. The first Calumet was the home of the 1886 fire was built in 1883 by the Close Brothers Land Company. They were prominent English real estate promoters, and the company was operated out of Lamars, Iowa by James Close, William B. Close, and S.W. Graves. Locals wanted to persuade the company to develop Pipestone land, as other prominent businessmen were unable or unwilling to manage a hotel capable of hosting the people who came through Pipestone by train. Close Brothers Land Company was offered 100 city lots and undivided interest in a 200-acre tract north of town. Corn ears from one of the 3 cornfields ended up being the deciding factor which closed the deal. The Close Brothers Land Company did own a lot of land, so we can safely assume that the corn was of a special variety. I, however, still think it's very amusing that corn, of all things, was the deciding factor of this land deal. Once the deal was struck, the English company purchased 100,000 acres of land from the Southern Minnesota Railroad Company and agreed to build the Calumet Hotel. The original Calumet was a 3-story wood structure located on the northwestern corner of what is now 2nd Street Northwest and Hiawatha Avenue. It was dubbed the Pride of Pipestone by locals, and soon after opening, it was acknowledged to be one of the finest hotels in the state outside of the cities. In 1884, an addition was added, and in 1885, the business was sold to Carl Brockway of Chicago and operated by Lem Ellsworth. When the building was built in 1883, it was estimated to cost around $11,000 to build. However, meetings with contractors revealed that it would cost $25,000. The 1884 addition cost $13,000, bringing the total building cost to $38,000. That is equivalent to about $1,299,539 in today's money. The furnishings were bought by C.C. Goodnow, the first landlord. The Calumet changed hands from C.C. Goodnow to H.B. Upman in 1884, and Upman purchased the furniture from Goodnow. A few months before the fire, Lem Ellsworth bought the hotel and continued to run it up until the fire. The first Calumet stood until December 15, 1886. According to the December 17, 1886 Pipestone County Star, about 1:45 o'clock on Wednesday morning, the cry of fire rang out upon the still night air. It only took an hour for the building to burn completely, and the fire continued to burn for another hour. No one knows when or how the fire was started, though it was speculated that the fire started in the kitchen, as it was not unusual for cooks to leave a fire going during the night so that it would be more warm in the morning. Despite the early hours of the morning, the scene was alive with people evacuating the hotel, evacuating the surrounding areas, and helping other people flee the flames. People ran out into the streets wearing little more than their dressing gowns. Many people did not have time to dress themselves in their haste to leave the building. In the process, many possessions were left behind and burned. Some servants were noted to have lost everything they had, with one lady in particularly having lost $100 worth of clothing and jewelry, as well as some loose change that she had stored in her personal belongings. Newspapers from the time record that the Calumet were a hotspot for relic hunters. Paragraphs about relic requests and finds would be posted in the paper, with one person even putting in a request stating that he would pay a handsome reward for anyone who found the key to room 4. Due to the building pressure caused by growing smoke, there was an explosion in the southeast side of the building, which knocked off the brick cornice along the top of the building. The only thing that prevented the fire from spreading to surrounding buildings was the harsh Minnesota winter. On the night of the fire, it was 25 degrees below zero, and the surrounding rooftops were covered in ice and sleet from a recent storm. The Commerce Building was one of the few that suffered damage, with the explosion cracking every window on the building's north side. The loss of the large plate glass window in the bank of southwestern Minnesota is also attributed to the fire. The fire resulted in 3 injuries and a single casualty. David McCullough, Virgil Pendergast, and a Louis Dixon are listed by a newspaper headline from December 17th as being severely injured. A little Negro bellboy is also mentioned to be injured by the paper, while the name Louis Dixon never appears outside of the headline. It's not until the December 21st paper that the bellboy is addressed by name, confirming that he is indeed Louis Dixon. Louis received his injuries by being caught under the fallen bricks. Unlike the other 2 victims, not much about Louis is revealed in the first article. 2 passages from the December 17th, 1886 newspaper give us some information about him. The first one gives a 1-sentence explanation of his injuries and states that he was pulled from the rubble more dead than alive. The other passage tells how the boy alerted the other servants and urged them to leave the building. In the December 21st paper, we get an update on Louis, and it states that by Sunday the 19th, he could sit up and that it was likely that he'd make a full recovery. Virgil Pendergast was the least injured of the 3. He was a young worker at Carnegie Livery Stable. The young man is said to have been caught by the falling bricks. His legs were badly bruised, and the newspaper goes on to say that his injuries were luckily not serious. By the 21st, he was reported to have been improving nicely, though he was still confined to bed rest. David McCullough was the 3rd person injured in the fire. He was the clerk's brother, and it was speculated that he was searching for said brother when he was crushed beneath a pile of fallen bricks. His injuries were extensive and believed to be both internal as well as external. He was taken to the central house to be treated, and it was feared by many that he would die of his injuries. As of the newspaper from December 21st, McCullough was slowly improving. Though he survived, he never truly recovered, and he lived the rest of his life handicapped. The sole casualty of the 1886 fire was Reverend Alfred Stoddard Orcutt. Reverend Orcutt was born July 18, 1849, in Auburn Corners, Ohio. He and his family moved twice when he was a child, the first time to Monona, Iowa, when Orcutt was 2, and they then settled in Mantorville, Minnesota, when he was 6. At age 17, he started school in Wisoja irregularly for several years before attending Denison Baptist University in Granville, Ohio. In 1877, Orcutt both graduated and married as Miss Shepherdson of Granville, Ohio. He came to Pipestone in the spring of 1885 as a missionary, where he established a Baptist church. On the morning of December 15, 1886, he was crushed by the fallen cornice of the Calumet. His body was severely burned by the time it was recovered, and it took people who witnessed the Reverend at the scene and papers that were found on his person for the body to be identified. He died at age 37 and was buried at Maple Grove Cemetery in Granville, Ohio. Reverend Orcutt left behind his wife and 3 children, 2 boys aged 4 and 6, and a girl just 18 months old. The fire ended up causing about $45,000 of damage to the building. Combined insurance covered $22,000, and to put that in terms of today's money, they had about $752,365 in insurance to cover around $1,538,928 in damages. The death of Reverend Orcutt and the damage caused to the hotel showed Pipestone residents just how unprepared they were to handle big fires. Within the week, the town organized a fire department, started plans for local waterworks, and purchased 2 chemical fire trucks and a hook and ladder truck. There was a push for officials to establish a fire limit in which all buildings intended for business had to be built of stone. It wasn't long until efforts were focused on rebuilding the Calumet. What is stated to be a bonus of several $1,000s was raised by the citizens of Pipestone to rebuild the hotel to its former glory. However, the owner, Carl Brockway, decided that there were better ways for him to invest the money. This stopped all conversations on rebuilding. Bankers Stoner and Milas were the first ones to set about building the new hotel. It seemed ideal to them that they combine the hotel and their banking business into one building. The people of Pipestone once again rounded up funding. Instead of the several $1,000s initially raised, the people provided $1,500, which was perhaps a sign of their broken trust. Construction for the new Calumet began in 1887. Stonework was contracted to C. Smith, and the contract for carpentry was given to William Frost. The new Calumet was completed in 1888, having been constructed a block south of the original. It was a 50 by 100 feet stone building with 3 floors and a basement. The cost of the building was $30,000. Today, that would cost about $1,015,153 to build. Being built of stone, the Calumet was deemed fireproof. Knowing what happened to the hotel afterwards, the statement was at best ironic, and at worst a jinx. The building was heated by steam, hot and cold water was piped through each room, and a new bell system was installed that connected each room to the main office. Newspapers reported that the hotel had every modern amenity for one's comfort. As of November 9th, 1888, one C.M. Chambers resigned from the Burlington Depot and became the Calumet's landlord. It opened on Thanksgiving Day of 1888. Originally, the landlord was set on hosting a ball and banquet to celebrate the opening. However, when he discovered that the opening would be on Thanksgiving, he decided to forego the ball, but they continued on with plans to host a banquet. Everyone was invited, and people began entering the building at 11:30 to look around. By 12, a large number of people were in the Calumet marveling at the architecture and the furniture. A few minutes after 12, the dining room was opened for guests to feast. Around 100 guests were present at the event. In 1889, the Calumet was enlarged with a 3-story addition to the south side. It was completed within the year, and on February 22nd, 1900, the hotel hosted a grand reopening. It was a lavish event consisting of a banquet and a ball, and hosting at least 200 guests. The event lasted from 7:30 in the evening until 4 o'clock in the morning. In July of 1911, arrangements were made for 50 telephones to be installed in different rooms, and in 1913, a 4th floor was added to the building. 4th floor construction started Friday, September 5th. After construction was completed, there were a total of 90 rooms in the hotel. The hotel continued operating until February 14th, 1944. Various businesses operated outside of the Calumet, including the Western Union Telegraph Co., the Olson's Shoe Store, Miss Ann Pugh's Beauty Parlor, and many more. The Calumet was also used as a bus station for Greyhound and Jackrabbit bus lines. At about 9 o'clock in the evening, a fire broke out. It was believed that the fire was started by faulty kitchen wiring. At about 9:20, the fire was discovered, and staff began alerting and waking guests to begin evacuations. Phone lines were reported to have gone out around the time the fire started, yet they were later operational after the fire was extinguished. The fire lasted into the early hours of the morning, and it took around 260,000 gallons of water to put out the fire. Hoses dispensed water at about 1,000 gallons a minute. The west side of the building, which was above the kitchen, was the hardest for firefighters to extinguish. It was 2 o'clock in the morning by the time the firefighters had the blaze under control. The fire resulted in just one casualty. A man by the name of Christian Earl Hirschberger was found dead in a fourth-floor hallway close to his room. The cause of death was determined to be suffocation, but it was also suggested that it was actually from a weak heart. Hirschberger was born on May 23, 1888 in Windham, Kansas, and on September 22nd of 1909, he married Rhea McDaniel of Jet, Oklahoma. Together, they had 4 kids, 3 of which survived to adulthood. Throughout his life, Hirschberger worked, owned, and operated several newspapers. His newspaper career started in 1910 when he became the publisher of the Jet County paper titled The Visitor under lease. Just a year later, in 1911, Hirschberger bought the Supply Woodward County Republican and operated it until 1917, when he became a banker at Follett, Texas Farmers National Bank. This only lasted a year before he began publishing the Buffalo Republican newspaper. He continued to own and operate different Oklahoma newspapers up until his death. Before his death, Hirschberger spent a year running a map service based out of Worthington. Having arrived in Worthington on January 1st of 1943, Hirschberger originally worked for the Hickson Map House of Rockford III before founding the Northwest Map Service in early 1944. Thanks to a newspaper clipping, we find out that Hirschberger spent some time in Sleepy Eye in Brown County the summer before his death, where he spent his time compiling Brown County atlases. He passed away at age 55, and his obituary in the February 18, 1944 copy of the Pipestone County Star reports that his son, Max, had taken the body back to Medford, Oklahoma, where they owned property. Hirschberger was buried at Pleasant View Cemetery in Jet, Oklahoma. He was survived by his wife, his son, and his 2 daughters. The fire left 2 other people hospitalized and another injured. Both Joe Burke of Austin, Minnesota, and Harold D. Davis of Sioux City, Iowa, suffered smoke inhalation and shock and were hospitalized. Both quickly recovered, with Burke being released on the 15th and Davis on the 16th. J.B. Bess from Moorhead, Minnesota, injured himself as he was crossing the road. He tripped over a fire hose and injured his head. He ended up receiving 4 head stitches and a bruised eye. Talk of repairs began immediately after the fire. The February 18, 1944 print from the Pipestone County Star assures readers that the hotel would be repaired and restored at the earliest possible date. Investigations began to figure out what exactly caused the fire, but no cause was determined. State officials were brought in to further investigate, but still no definitive source was found. The most severe damage was confined to the south 1/3 of the building, with most of the damage in the other parts of the building being caused by smoke and water. By February the 16th, rooms in the northern section of the building were becoming reoccupied. The Western Union Telegraph Company, the C.H. Gillian, and E.J. Buell offices were reoccupied the same day. Other northern rooms rapidly followed suit upon restorations. It was planned to resume hotel business as soon as possible, but making use of the least effective rooms. The work was expected to be done within 2 weeks, at which time the lobby and 35 rooms would be operational. Promptness was determined by whether or not the owners could acquire the necessary workers and materials. As of February 25th, priorities were granted for the repairs and work could properly begin. Based on a newspaper headline from March 3rd, things seemed to be going according to plan. The headline reads, "Calumet is nearly ready for reopening." Despite the assurance, unexpected difficulties delayed repair work. However, there did continue to be slow improvements. On April 4th, it was announced that Dr. J.E. Kickland had reopened his offices in the Calumet. News of the fire reached a surprisingly wide area. Obituaries for C.E. Hirschberger appeared in the papers of locations he had worked. This included newspapers from Worthington and Sleepy Eye. The fire was even featured in a newspaper outside of the United States. The New Guinea Gold, a newspaper published in New Guinea, included the fire as part of 5 or 6 items of news which came from the United States. Captain E.L. Smith, who was stationed there at the time, wrote home to his wife to tell her about the article. While I was researching, I found the similarities between the fires very interesting. Both fires took place in the harsh throes of Minnesota winter at inopportune hours of the day. In both fires, there were the same number of injuries, and both suffered only a single casualty. While no one knows how either fire was started, theories end up pointing to similar conclusions. Even where the fires originated is suspected to be the same. Like most places which experience tragedies, the Calumet has been dubbed as haunted. People have claimed to have heard unexplained cries, seen objects move on their own, or even witnessed shadowy apparitions roaming the halls. Most speculate that the spirits of Reverend Orcutt and C.E. Hirschberger remain in the hotel and are the source of these occurrences. It is, of course, impossible to definitively state whether any of these are true or simply hoaxes meant to draw in the public's attention. Most of the information on the supposed phenomenon that comes from the Calumet is found in questionable websites that gloss over, misinterpret, or create the history that would back their claims. When I was little and I would hear stories of the Calumet ghosts, and as I began researching, I started by looking at some of these sketchy websites to refresh my memory on the versions of the stories I would have heard in childhood. While those websites did give me some great jumping off points for more in-depth research, I also ended up following quite a few dead ends. One particular website mentioned a basement fire that supposedly took place on December 30th of 1906. The website mentioned that the fire was covered in some newspapers, so naturally, I figured it should be easy to find. It should be easy to just look on microfilm or flip through old newspapers, look at the digitized versions that are on the website. But I came up with nothing. There was no mention of the fire in any newspapers. The first newspaper to be published after the fire was supposed to take place was the January 3rd edition of the Farmer's Leader. Now, it's possible that the fire was simply not recorded. Maybe news of the blaze spread fast enough by word of mouth that the papers didn't feel the need to include it. It's more likely, however, that this 1906 fire was fabricated to increase intrigue. So I kept looking at different websites to see if I could maybe find any other mention of a 1906 basement fire. And again, I found nothing. In most every other website, they only mention the 1886 and 1944 fires, if they mention any dates or specific details at all. Regardless of the false stories, the Calumet is an inspiring story of perseverance. The rich history of the Calumet shows some of the spirit and community of Pipestone County, and it is a bright reminder of our past, the county's hard moments, and its prosperity. That's the end.
Does anybody have questions for Olyvia?
Olyvia, you know that picture of the building just before this one that had the
Yep.
walk-around balcony? Do you know when that went on or why it went off or anything?
Well, in my research, I tried to figure out when this picture would take place, and I can put it by the lack of the fourth floor before 1913. So around that time is when it was up. I think I recall reading that it was taken down as the fourth floor was added or a little bit afterwards. So
Because it looks like it was very well
Mm-hmm.
secured, planned and put up there. That would be, they'd have to meet all the safety standards at that
Mhm.
time. Yeah. Yeah. The other question I had was about the livery, way back when. Was the livery behind the hotel or was it out at the fairgrounds?
I believe it was nearby. It was either behind it or across the street from what I've read, though
Oh, okay.
I could be mistaken on
Close
its
by.
exact location.
Yeah.
Close by from what I gather.
Okay.
No, it says a Calumet here in the bank, is that the two signs?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yes.
on the top. Is that
I-
Calumet?
Mm-hmm. The far one over here is
Yeah.
what yeah, so,
That
yeah,
goes this
right
way.
before. Mm-hmm.
Then
Yep.
your next picture has the fourth floor on it.
Yep, so this one's more from like the 1960s, I think, from when I researched, or closer to that range for dates on that one.
Coming outside this way.
And the front stairs were enclosed on that picture.
Yes, yes, they were.
That's interesting. I never
Mhm.
saw that. Anyone here?
No clue.
1960s? You said?
This I believe is somewhere from the 1960s, maybe 50s, 70s, somewhere around there.